live. Hello everyone, I am delighted to welcome Robert J. Lloyd for tonight's author chat. He's going to start us off with an introduction to himself and a little bit about his book that is published today.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Caroline. That's brilliant. I've been very kind of you to invite me, and but the reason you have is my book, The Bloodless Boy, which is out in the UK today. Actually, it was published in the US on Tuesday, so it's just a hardback at the moment. Beautifully produced by Melville House with end papers, and I'm very, very pleased with the way that they've done it, with the interior and so on. It's really nicely set out. So it's a historical murder mystery set in 1678 and involves, as the title suggests, the discovery of a boy whose blood has been completely drained from him. And so the curator of the Royal Society, who was Robert Hooke, and his assistant Harry Hunt, are brought onto the case. Their expertise in blood transfusion, anatomy, the science of the day, is required by the Justice of Peace, Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey, who brings them into his investigation to the discovery of well, there are three in the end, bloodless boys.
So how's the initial reception been? You were talking before we went live about there being reviews in the Washington Post and...
Well, it's been quite extraordinary. The Sunday Times led the way with one of their, they named it as one of their thrillers for November, and did a very a wonderful review on it. And then the Times Crime Club followed up with another very generous review, and the Times did another review, rather than the Sunday Times, the Daily Times. So three different journalists raved about it, which it was incredible. The Washington Post today, obviously, my publisher is in New York, so primarily it's a US production and distribution is happening in the US, but Melville House have a UK arm as well, a London office. So I'm kind of checking up on what's happening in the States as well as what's happening certainly from today with publication in the UK today. So lots of things going on, and things like a blog tour going on, and Goodreads and Twitter and various independent reviewers with blogs and so on. So the reception has been incredible, and it's been wonderful. It's been a very enjoyable few days.
So you said you've self-published before. Is there more to come? Are you going to write more books with Robert Hooke in?
Yeah, the sequel to this, originally it was called The Clockwork Assassins, but we're going to change the title. So that's going to be out this time next year. So the self-published version of that was written. It's undergoing some dusting, some tweaks to it, as this one was. It's slightly different from the self-published version. So the sequel, the second book in the series, is going to be out next year. In the meantime, I'm hard at work on book 3 and planning book 4. So yes, Robert Hooke and Harry Hunt continue to investigate. I guess scientifically based and medically based, or crimes where their expertise is required.
I'm curious as to why you chose to use real characters, like real people, as characters in your book.
Well, it's a fairly standard thing to do. Plenty of books, especially historical novels, use real characters. But my MA degree was all about Robert Hooke. So when I decided to write a novel, and I wanted to write a thriller, I had all this research on the 17th century from having studied Robert Hooke and studied the early Royal Society. It's a short step then with things such as the mystery of Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey's murder. It's not too much of a spoiler, I think, to say that. It's a short step really to start using real characters. You've got a lot of research on them. In my mind, I have a particular picture of Robert Hooke. There's a lot of information about Robert Hooke in his diary, for example, and the tone of his voice comes through really clearly in that, and in Micrographia, his famous book full of his microscopic discoveries. So Robert Hooke's voice was very kind of clear to me in my head. There's less known about Harry Hunt. He was real. He was Hooke's apprentice and assistant. So I had plenty of scope to make up Harry Hunt's character. And then you've got obvious people like King Charles II and other characters in his court, which beg to be fictionalized and used. So I enjoy the mixture of using some minor characters which are made up, and then with the major characters they tend to be real, and it's good fun to think of fictional scenarios which still have to fit in with the kind of known history or known characteristics of a person. You can't just suddenly make up a completely different version of Hooke, but there's leeway to do so, and obviously there are gaps in the historical accounts as well, or contradictions between historians which are fun to try and exploit, and the antagonist, for example, John Locke in the book, at this particular time, strange gaps appear in the letters that he wrote. I think some sort of destroying correspondence went on, because if he was implicated with Shaftesbury during the exclusion crisis, the late 1670s and into the 80s, I think some letter burning probably went on. So it's good fun to actually think, well, what were they up to, and then make stuff up, which I do quite shamelessly sometimes.
Do you touch, because you touched sort of briefly on it in The Bloodless Boy about his rivalry with Newton? Does that come to the fore in other books more, or will it come to the fore in other books?
It's more a factor in book 2. There's a mention of their rivalry. In book 2, Harry Hunt goes to visit Isaac Newton in Cambridge. They're set a few years before Isaac Newton moved to London and became the president of the Royal Society. So it's not really infringing on the timeline yet. The impact that Isaac Newton had on Hooke and his reputation in later years. Isaac Newton, I think, worked to suppress Hooke's reputation a little bit.
Yeah, they really did not get on, did they?
They disagree. That there's a fascinating correspondence between them in the late 1670s, which is probably best described as icily polite. But they had a correspondence. It was in later years, but when Principia was published, Hooke definitely felt that Newton hadn't given him the credit that he thought he should have been accorded. So such things as the inverse square law, gravitational attraction between bodies or planets. Hooke felt that he had led Newton to that, and felt that Newton wasn't public enough in acknowledging that fact. So there was friction between them.
Yeah, no, I've read some of the letters between them.
Yeah.
Less from a historical aspect and more a science.
Right.
Yeah. Someone on here has asked why you chose crime as a genre.
Crime. Well, I said these books were self-published. The Bloodless Boy was published back in 2014. It was in the year 2000 when I actually started it, which is an insanely long gestation period for the book, and finally to come out and be published by a mainstream publisher. But in the year 2000, I knew I wanted to write a book. I sort of set myself the intellectual challenge of writing a book with, stupidly and naively. I had no idea how difficult it would end up proving to be, but I wanted to write a book. I thought about what kind of books I liked, and they were a mixture of historical novels and crime novels, but the book that I analysed was Frederick Forsyth's The Odessa File as a model to use, which still is one of my favourite books. And I think with a crime, and the engine of the book then is motoring towards a solution to that crime. You can fit all sorts of other stuff off that, and you can as long as you've got that driving motor of will he solve the crime, probably taken for granted that your main investigator will solve the crime, but how will he do it, and what will he uncover on the way. He, in my case, because most of the characters in the book are male, the female characters are up to all sorts, but that kind of comes out later in the book.
Yeah,
I'm doing an interview like this because I'm trying not to give too much away, and yet I want to tell you all about it.
I know. I was just going to say who two of my favourite female characters were in the book, and then I thought I actually don't know if I can because they come to the fore more towards the end.
Yeah,
I don't want to give any spoilers.
Let's leave that alone a little bit. Obviously, it was fun to play with the fact that this was an incredibly male-dominated world, the Royal Society at this time, and the kind of the scandal and the amusement that occurred when the Duchess Cavendish was allowed into the Royal Society meeting, and the idea of having a female, at a reading or an experimental trial presented, caused great consternation and was remarked upon. This was a really male world, so trying to fit my female characters within that was interesting, and they certainly come more to the fore in the second or the latter half of the book. I won't say any more than that.
Unfortunately, science is still quite a male-dominated world.
I would hope it's not true that it's as male-dominated as it was then, but I would agree with you from what I can see. I'm not a scientist. I'm not in those sort of professional circles, but certainly what you pick up on and read. I don't know what the situation is like in 2021, but if you look back at things like, DNA, for example, you look back in the 50s and 60s, and you look at people who were overlooked for Nobel Prizes and so on. You can very quickly find misogyny, I guess, is the word. Within mainstream science.
With the DNA one, they had also passed on, and they don't award them posthumously. So when the DNA one was awarded, that person missed out there had died.
Was that 3-4 years ago? It was very recent, wasn't it, that she finally got the kind of official acknowledgement?
I think she's always been on the papers, but they don't award Nobel Prizes posthumously.
Right.
To people. So DNA is my science.
Ah, right. Okay.
So.
So you speak from bitter experience a little bit when you suggest that science is a sexist activity?
No, I spoke from experience in that the science I studied, because I studied biology, is quite well represented across both sexes. But my husband did physics, and when he was studying at university, certainly there were very few women on that science course, if you know what I mean. So there are
there's a split between.
The balance isn't as much as you would hope, and there is still pushes to get more women into science.
Yeah.
So there obviously is a kind of a need for that. Yeah. TG, one of our author members, has asked you how long you've been writing.
I've always sort of written mainly actually songs. I've written a lot of songs over the years. This novel and the sequel back in 2000. I started it. So really, dabbling with these books, trying to bring them into some sort of shape and get the things finished. So much. I was doing them, part-time around full-time occupations, and sort of left them, came back to them, left them, came back to them. The second book was much quicker. I played around with a story where Marcel Duchamp was going to be the main investigator, set in 1920s Paris. I did a fine art degree. Now that was very much based on Duchamp, but I put that aside in the end. So I've kind of written poetry, song lyrics, which I've always enjoyed doing. But really, these are the only kind of extended pieces of writing that I've done. These two novels, and then novel 3, which is I'm well into, and planning novel 4 now. So I hope that answers the question okay.
No, it does. You've got a question here. I'm just going to look at who's written it. Sorry, so it'll look like I'm looking at my phone, but it's just to see who's asked the question. Sam has asked it. She said, "Has research ever changed your original idea of a book into something completely different?"
The difference between book 1 and book 2 is extraordinary, because I discovered planning. The first book took so long because I thrashed around for so long trying to find a villain. I kept chopping and changing, and originally to tie in with the known facts about Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey's death, I had the Earl of Pembroke as the baddie, but it was really retreading what history books tell us. It was much more liberating to step away from anything to do with the Earl of Pembroke, who's been fingered as a chief suspect in the Justice's murder. So I thrashed around for so long trying to get a plot that I was happy with. Like I say, I used the Odessa file as a model, and I used it far too closely to sort of help me try and structure, how long chapters should be and how long I should stay with particular sets of characters, and how rapidly I should change between them. And I got very, very bogged down with the first book. The second book, I planned it, and I had the ending. So when I wrote it, I had the ending in mind. So rather than taking 12 years or so, it took 2. So you know, that's I have learned a couple of things on the way. One is definitely planning. So yes, you know, book 1 changed all the time, and disastrously so at times, as I stumbled from one idea to another, and you'd be 100,000 words in and think, oh, you know, wouldn't it be nice if, and then you'd be rewriting the first third or the first 2/3 of the book, and never really getting to the end properly. It wasn't until I went out for a long walk one day, and suddenly, you know, as a proper flash of intuition, I knew exactly who my villain should be, and having decided on that, everything else fitted into place. So yes, I was terrible at chopping and changing, and it changed shape completely. The first book while I was writing it.
So it sounds like you've always intended to write historical fiction. Would you ever be tempted to write a sort of more modern day novel?
I love the fact that it's a pre-mobile phone world. I love the analog nature of the world that I describe. So things like letters and you know, sealed with wax, which are broken open at the post office, and all the kind of business of ciphers and spying, and the 17th century science, you know, the where science actually was then. I'm so kind of wrapped up in that. I find it difficult to, although I have fun sort of finding 17th century parallels with 21st century CSI techniques, or you know, the behavior at a crime scene, as you see in say, well, for example, in Rankin novels, where it's very formalized. The idea, because so little is known and stuff, there is room to make stuff up. The idea that my chief protagonist can be introducing these sorts of behaviors to stop evidence being corrupted, and you know, I mean, the other thing that I look at is Victorian crime. It's pre technology. It's pre DNA profiling. It's pre mobile phones. It's pre, you know, tracing people digitally and so on. So I like that. I like that world. I like the idea of you know, horse and carriage chases. It's a nice place. It's a nice place to be. So, no is my answer.
They did start having fingerprints and stuff, though, didn't they? Towards.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what are you looking at for fingerprints? Late 1860s, 1870s, something like that, and you know, that they were argued over for ages whether it would actually be any sort of efficacy. I haven't used footprints in The Bloodless Boy, but I am thinking that Harry Hunt would probably discuss at least the possibility of using fingerprints to trace a villain.
Yeah, or footprints. Yeah, it would be very interesting. TG wants to know if you've got a favourite character, because you've got quite a cast of characters.
Well, the old Colonel, Colonel Fields, who fought in the Civil Wars on the side of Parliament, became a leveller, and then in later years an Anabaptist preacher. He's a made-up character, and he is the one character that when I write him, and I'm re-editing book 2 now, and he's got a much larger part in book 2. He's the one character who just chats to me. His voice, I type his voice onto the page, I can hear him, and then he'll go on for pages and pages and pages, and then I have to edit him edit him down. He really does talk to me. The other spectacular character is Hortense Mancini, and if you don't know about Hortense Mancini, look her up, because she was, as well as being the richest woman in Europe through her marriage, she actually turned King Charles II down before his restoration, when he wanted to marry her because he was too poor. She was a niece of the Cardinal de Mazarin in France, and a lot more of her happens in book 2, because I'm very enamoured with Hortense Mancini. She had all sorts of adventures. Even after she died, she carried on having adventures. She carried on her travels, because her husband had her preserved and took her on his travels as he went across Europe with her body. She was a sword fighter, cross dresser, horse rider, gambler, card player. She's got everything going for her. So Hortense Mancini is a great character too.
I'm going to say my 2 favourites were the Colonel and Hook's young assistant.
You like Harry Hines?
No, I like the other young assistant that he had at the beginning of the book, that he has.
Hook's assistant. Oh, Tom Giles.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'm with you. Yeah.
I think they were my 2 favourites.
Mm-hmm. It's funny how relatively minor characters can cut through, isn't it? And different people. I read a really interesting review about the book, or review of the book today, by a professor of literature who equated it with 19th century literature. So it's the most academic review of The Godless Boy that I've seen. But she talks about the female characters in the book, and actually, and really fascinatingly so, I give relatively little page space to the female characters, but she's seen a depth in them that I'm really pleased by, obviously. But it's funny because Tom Giles, I had to think who you meant then. He's not he's a kind of constant presence, isn't he? Without really, he's kind of there and dancing around in his energetic self, isn't he? Until later in the book.
I think for me that was what brought the book to life more. The story is really good, but the cast of characters were what sort of breathed real life into it. So
Right.
I liked that sort of extended cast of characters. So Hook's daughter,
Yeah.
who is, and things, and you sort of get to know them at the periphery while the rest of the story is going on. I quite liked.
Yeah, trying to.
They were growing on you as you were reading.
Trying to do that, but keep the energy of the forward motion of the plot is, it's a difficult thing to do, and some people disagree. Some people think that I tried to write it so that it would wind up like one of Hook's pocket watches. It would start slowly and wind up and wind up and wind up, and more, by the end of the book, I want it to be quite sort of frantic. But you have to be very confident and self-assured to start a book slowly. You still need to hook people into your plot. So some people do think that it's a little bit slow to start. I hope that there's enough sort of there that will get people to get into the kind of thrills and spills of the second half of the book. I think by the end of the book, it's all getting quite manic, isn't it? There's a lot going on.
I think I would disagree. I think it's got quite an engaging opening.
I certainly hope it
the
does.
very beginning. It's got quite a start, hasn't it?
They find the body early on. Yes, and I think that's necessary. You need to get your investigation started. But I did want that feeling that it was accelerating through the book, through the plot.
I'm admiring all the books behind you while we're talking, and I noticed that you've got a copy of How Done It.
I do, yeah. Martin Edwards. Yes, there's plenty in there. Maybe one day I'll be asked to join the detection club. Who knows? That would be good, wouldn't it?
We're a big fan of Martin in the group. He's a member.
Yeah. Ah, great. Yeah, well, he was kind enough to have a look and review the book, and his quote about it is on the cover of the book. It's so he's read The Bloodless Boy, and
yeah,
and
he's an
enjoyed
absolute gent.
It'd be very helpful to me.
He's genuinely lovely, yeah. We've had him on a few times in the group, and he's really nice.
Right. Yeah. No, I've had well, I've had nothing but kind of generosity and help from established authors, which is you know a lovely thing. You kind of hear about the publishing industry or the literary industry and jealousies and backstabbing and all the rest of it. It's not something I've come across at all. And people like Martin, Christopher Fowler, obviously, who originally stumbled across the books and publicized them. He was the reason that they got to my eventual publisher. So they were no longer self-published. He found the books. Andrew Taylor has been incredibly helpful and generous. I'm impressed by these people. It's a nice bunch. Maybe it's a sort of historical novelists thing. I'm not sure. Martin is more up to date, isn't he?
I think it's just a crime novelist thing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Most crime novelists are genuinely lovely people.
Funny that, isn't it?
Maybe they just get all the horribleness out on the
page. Yes, it is quite strange. When a couple of people have said that there are a couple of kind of gory episodes in my book. By the time you've gone through it 100 times, editing it, you forget what the impact's likely to be of reading something for the first time. You lose sight of that. It's great seeing people's reactions to it, because I kind of no longer see it. I've had it in my life for so long. So it's
Sam wants to know if there are any resources you found useful when moving from pantsing to planning.
I've got. I don't know. Can you see that shelf there? I don't pull them all out. All these books. So the storybook, Save the Cat, Sign on Writing, Novel Writing, How to Write, getting published. But the absolute standout book for me has been David Badeline's book. And I recommend that to anyone, and that's a brilliant resource. There's one which is Bananas. It's I can't remember what it's called, but it breaks a script down into 120 beats and tells you, each beat being a page, what should happen on page 1, what should happen on page 2, what should happen on page 3, and it's so absolutely exact with its prescription of how you should write a plot, and it's actually a useful thing to react against. I can't remember what it's called now. But yeah, so I've got plenty of books. What was another one that the 7 plot points down wells is a nice model to follow and play with, particularly with subplots and how you get your subplots working together and how you get them to pay off next to one another. at certain points of the work. So I don't know, a mixture of trial and error, and reading how-tos, such as how done it, which people who know how to do it are surely worthy of listening to, and being read. They've been there and done that.
There's a really good book of Martin's. It's his the series is written with Rachel Savanake, where he goes back at the end and tells you where he hid all the clues.
Right.
Like all the way through the book. So he's told you like at the back in a glossary, kind of almost like where every clue is hidden. So you can see exactly how he did it.
Getting all your Chekhov's guns in a row. It's trying to get those. And again, it's. I mean, beta readers are another very useful thing to have, because some people just see, the elaborate clue that you think you've laid so perfectly, and you're so pleased with yourself about. And well, it was obvious that it was then and there and that person. And you have to go back to the drawing board and try and disguise these things. So there are lots of different strategies to do that. Dropping in little nuggets of information and trying to draw attention away from them, even as you plant them, as you put them in. So,
right. Yes. So I'm going to hit you with some of our group's favourite questions now.
All right. Okay. How tremulous should I be feeling?
Well, not at all. They're good ones to ask, because you always get really interesting answers every time. So, number 1, can you tell us what the most recent scene you wrote was, without giving away a spoiler?
Well, I'm currently editing book 2, so I've just gone all the way through book 2 again, which was self-published in 2016, but before that, so that's been really the last 3 or 4 weeks of work. Before that was a scene in book 3 where Harry Hunt has been falsely implicated in a crime, and he's been arrested by the justice who replaced Edmund Berry Godfrey, who was Sir John Resby. So there's a scene where Harry is being arrested and under false testimony, and is being taken from Bloomsbury, his home, through an execution. There's a crowd gathering for that month's execution at Tyburn. So it's a big scene that I was writing, but I've been pulled away from that in order to do a re-edit.
Right, and then the next question: have you ever acted out a scene?
I'd say it out loud. I was in all sorts of plays at school and at university or art college. I was in the drama society, and I actually directed a play, Noel Coward's Hay Fever. So I should be acting these things out more. I do say them out loud. I mean, people like the Colonel, they have a rhythm, a way of speaking. So certainly with dialogue, I'll read things out loud. I draw things. I draw plans. So if I'm writing a chapter and there's a particular scene, and I'll draw that room, or such as the bloodless boy is stored inside an air pump, and the cellars to Gresham College I've imagined, but they're quite complex. So I drew out a plan so that I knew where my characters were going, and different model of St. Paul's, all stored down in the cellar. I needed to know where all these things are, so I tend to draw things out. I don't act them out, and that's an interesting question, because I've got a bit of a I've got a bit of form with acting, but no. So there must be sort of separate areas of my head, mustn't they? So I'm wondering now why I don't. That's a good question.
Well, we've had authors that have held knives to their throats to see what it feels like. We've had people who've dangled off Whitby Pier, acting out scenes. So.
Yeah. I went to London. Harry does a walk right at the beginning, which becomes important. It's the spoilers thing again, isn't it? The timing of the walk was important. So I went to London and walked from Gresham College, where Gresham College was, is now the HSBC building, Tower 42, I think it's called, on Threadneedle Street, on Bishopsgate Street. So I did the walk to where the boys found where the Fleet Canal was. It's now covered over, obviously, to get the timing of that perfectly. And that changed things. But I live in South Wales, and I write about 17th century London, and I suppose there's a limit to what I can do physically. I have to live in my imagination a fair bit to get these things just so.
Right, so keeping on with our group's favourite questions, your most memorable moments as an author?
Well, I guess, you have lots of little victories while you're writing. You have some really sort of joyous days when it's going well, but really it has to be getting the email from Dennis Johnson at Melville House Publishing just before Christmas. I paint pictures, I paint landscapes, and I have a website devoted to my paintings, and I get all sorts of odd, scammy emails. And I don't know why people feel the need to pick on artists, but I get quite a few scam emails to that account. And I must have read Dennis's letter 3 or 4 times before I was convinced that it's not a scam, and that actually this is a real publisher in New York who says he wants to publish my book and the second book and pay me in advance to do so. So that was quite an extraordinary moment, as you can imagine. So I think that has to be my answer. That kind of breakthrough, of moments of recognition. Before that, it was being on Radio 4 when Christopher Fowler was talking about my book suddenly, which just was a self-published book that kind of potted along on Amazon. And I got a very excited call from my daughter saying, "You've just been on Radio 4." And it was like, what on earth is this about? So it was on the Miles Jupp program. Unputdownable Stories, the program was called, and mine was one of them, according to Christopher Fowler. So that was a pretty special moment as well.
Good answers. Would you make a graphic novel of one of your book?
I wouldn't. I like painting landscapes and portraits. I haven't got the skills to do a graphic the picture side of things. I think I would struggle with. I would love somebody more competent to provide the images. I would love to do a cut down version, minus the description, to let an artist actually provide the imagery, releasing me to just sort of focus on what the characters are saying, and doing that would be very interesting. I really enjoyed collaborating actually with the chief editor at Melville House, which I wasn't expecting to do, but so working with someone else on the material to put it into whatever shape, whether it were a radio show or a film or a TV series, or we can all imagine, can't we? But the process of doing that would be very interesting.
Have you got plans for audio versions of your books?
The audio version is available. So James Gillies reads it beautifully. It's selling well on Amazon actually. It's up there today, and certainly in the sort of historical thrillers chart. James Gillies makes everything sound epic. Even at the beginning when Harry takes off his glasses, you're already gripped. So I recommend the sample of it is on Amazon. He's got a great voice. You'll recognize his voice straight away. He's done a lot of stuff, and BBC stuff, continuity announcements, and then you just know his voice without necessarily knowing who he is. So the version of The Bloodless Boy on Audible is a great thing.
Yeah, we have some members that prefer to read on Audible.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, but plenty of people do. I find it difficult. I would get distracted. Whereas if I've got a book in my hand, I'm in that bubble then. Whereas if I've got it on and listening to it, I'll probably be doing something else at the same time. It wouldn't be the same experience personally. So I don't tend to listen to Audible. No,
I don't either.
Yeah.
What have you read recently that you've enjoyed?
Antonin Varenne Retribution Road is what I'm reading at the moment, which is a great read, set in 1850s into the 1860s, and takes you from he was a soldier in the East India Company in Burma, and then it takes him to London, and he's trying to track all these different people down in various cities, and now he's just landed in New York. That's beautifully written, very excitingly done, quite sort of hard hitting. It's quite a tough read. Another great book that I have to mention is Elizabeth Gilbert, The Signature of All Things, which I read recently. And in fact, her City of Girls is completely different and great fun, and so that's a sort of standout read. Rachel Kaddish, The Weight of Ink. I read that recently. A wonderful book. So I'm on quite a good vein of form for finding good books that I've enjoyed. Through lockdown, the last couple of years, I found it very difficult to settle down to a novel. I was doing a lot of research and able to read history, but really struggling with novels. Whereas recently, I've got back into them. I've got back into that headspace, and I found some great books along the way.
Good. You've been asked, I think this is T's asked this, is there a time period you would like to visit for research?
What's separate to the books I'm doing now?
Well, it could. I mean, if it is, I don't think it says that. It just says, "Is there a time period?" If you could go back and visit a time period,
well, physically time travel
visit for research.
Well, I would go back to 1678, and it will be nice to tell Robert Hooke that he's going to be remembered in 350 years time. That would be a nice thing to be able to say to the man, that his ideas aren't forgotten, and you can still buy his micrographia. He would be very pleased by that, I think.
So what drew you into studying? You said you did your MA and you'd researched like Robert Hooke and things. What drew you into looking at him in particular?
It was sort of accidental, really. The fine art degree that I did I went really overboard on the thesis on the art history side. I think we were supposed to write 12,000 words, and I wrote 25,000 or something silly. And I got really into the kind of theory of stuff. So I ended up doing an MA. I found a history of ideas MA in Newcastle, which was part-time, which suited me well. So it was evenings, because I was massively in debt, having done a fine art degree and spent a fortune on film and video. I was hugely in debt, so I needed a job. So I found a part-time MA, and the way that they structured this history of ideas MA was you could either do the 19th century or the 17th century. And I think that was because of the specialisms of the people who taught the course at the time. And so I sort of fell into the 17th century. And I was researching John Aubrey when I found Robert Hooke's diary, and got completely sucked into Hooke's world through reading the very sort of informal scribblings and jottings of his diary, which can be very evocative, because you're sort of putting the pieces together. He doesn't, because it's a personal record. He doesn't join all the dots. So you have to when you're reading his diary. So it became a really fascinating document that you're having to really work quite hard at it in order to understand. So it's like reading a thriller. Is Hooke's diary. So that was the big discovery for me. And as so many things in life, very, very accidental and tenuous. It could easily have gone a different way. I could have been wandering along a different set of shelves that evening.
We could have had a different investigator in your books.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I say, I was playing around with the idea of having Marcel Duchamp as a detective. I think this sort of idea of sort of odd detectives goes back to it's got to be The Name of the Rose, hasn't it? And Umberto Eco, and Sean Connery is what's his name? It's Baskerville, isn't it? In The Name of the Rose.
T, I think it's T who asked the question. She said that she really likes your answer that you gave about going back to tell Hooke that he would be important in the future.
Yeah, I felt quite emotional as I said it. It would be a nice thing to do, wouldn't it? Yeah. So yeah, to tell him about the future without letting him influence the past. That would be tricky, wouldn't it? You'd get back to your own time, and he's gone and changed everything. But yeah, that would be a nice thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
Shake the man's hand. It's been such a big part of my life since my MA. So yes, I do have to keep the real Hooke separate from my fictionalized version of him, and I do sometimes feel I'm letting him down, but I would be crippled if I were too enamored by the real Hooke. I have to sort of separate myself from that in order to put him in situations that I know that are fictional.
So you mentioned his diary, that you sort of discovered it and started reading it, and you mentioned his diary in the book as well. And doesn't he record all sorts of, like, he records every minutiae of his life, doesn't he? And
well, he did. He was he was a meteorologist, so he made all sorts of improvements to barometers, for example, and he performed weather observations every day, and I think that's how the diary seems to have started. It started as a way of recording the changing weather, and then he began to be a little bit more detailed about business meetings. He's always complaining about people who owed him money. He was always chasing money. He found being paid quite problematic, both by the Royal Society and Sir John Cutler, he did lectures for. So it was a kind of a minute book, a commonplace book. He also recorded all of the different medicines that he took. He was always unwell. He'd been quite a sickly child. He used it as a record of input and output, I suppose. And both are quite spectacular. All sorts of things you wouldn't think of taking yourself. But all his different excursions to the coffee houses and taverns of the time, he was incredibly busy and social. Certainly at the time that I'm writing. So his diary, sometimes it's just a list of names. He met these people, but without any real knowledge, and unless you kind of look across and you know that he was meeting, I don't know, Ralph Montague because he was building his house at the time, but often it would just say Montague, and you don't know what that meeting was. So you can kind of imagine it. You can fill in the gaps in the diary to make a fictitious plot, which has been great.
It can be incredible to go back and read sort of diaries and things from people.
Yeah, and people. If you read your parents' diary, you think you know someone. A diary can completely change your picture of that person, can't it? So Hooks is fascinating because it's from so long ago, but also nothing really changes, which I think the couple of people have picked up on the book. All the same hypocrisies and panics and prejudices. We still, my book might be set in an anti-Catholic age, but all the same sort of denialism and corruption and all the things that trouble us now. It's all the same 350 years ago. That the world hasn't really changed that much, has it? Or people haven't.
No, we have better medicine now.
Say again.
But we have better medicine now.
Sorry, I still.
It does. Yeah, I said we had better medicine now. It doesn't.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yes. Well, when you hear them taking things like mercury, if for syphilis, the disease and the cure, just horrendous things that it did to you. It gave you pointed teeth. Very very sort of. Hook regularly drinks steel wine, which I'm fascinated by. All sorts of metals put into substances. So it's quite nice when you see him just enjoying a hot chocolate at Man's. He did like his hot chocolate.
We have 2 minutes left. Do you want to show us off the book again?
How long have we had?
An hour.
Really?
Yeah.
That's quite extraordinary. Well, folks, there. Thanks ever so much for this opportunity. I hope you've enjoyed my sometimes slightly confused answers. I'm still recovering from a bout of COVID, so my voice isn't quite there yet. But I really appreciate being allowed to do this. I'm phenomenally smug about the book coming out after all this time, and so pleased that it's out there. And if you do come across it, whether on Audible or on the page, I very much hope you enjoy it.
It's a really good read. I recommend it.
Thank you.
And then all that's left for me to say is thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.